Hello, 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 and happy Thursday. How you doing?
Happy Thursday. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I turned 38 today.
Oh my God, it's your birthday?
May 16th, 1986. Woo
Well, happy birthday.
woo! I thank you, thank you, thank you. It's, ah, life is so interesting at 38. I never thought I would be where I am today.
hmm
I like remember when we were at Clearview and I was just an associate therapist and I had no clue what was going to happen in my life and in my career in the jobs world and what
hmm
my life is going to look like, and here I am today anxiously running my own company and doing a podcast.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we can actually thank for this that networking event that we went to about almost 2 years ago now.
hmm
Um, we went to this for our listeners. We went to this networking event at a restaurant. I hadn't seen Lily since I moved back. I had moved back like maybe a few weeks before to
Mind you, I was
California.
sending her messages on Instagram like, when am I going to see your face? When am I going to see your face? When am I going to see your face? And she kept saying, we're going to do it soon. We're going to do it soon. And also, I kept trying to look to find her phone number in my phone. And I was like, what the fuck happened to Lauren's phone number in my phone? It's not there.
Yeah,
So I just have to slide in her DMs and say, when am I going to see your
yeah.
face?
And there she slid. But it was actually at a restaurant.
Yes.
But do you remember when we went around, and I don't even know how the topic came up at that networking dinner, but it was like, how what was your first job?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking about that a lot. Like even as you were talking about like, can you believe we're here? And I was like, can I believe that I'm here today when I got fired from my first job at a pottery studio because I was shit talking my boss? Yeah. And her friend was sitting at the table listening to me saying nasty things about my boss. So yes. Yeah, I was like thinking a lot about, yeah, our work trajectories and being like, oh yeah, yeah, I did. Like, because when we talk about, I don't know, when you talk to your clients about like work stuff, and I'm like, I'm assuming that most of my clients think I'm probably a reasonably professional person, and I'm like, little do they know, like 16-year-old Lauren sitting in the back of a pottery studio and being like, my bosses steal my tips, and just so rageful, and yeah, and so I think that's probably our topic of like work is just such a different domain. I mean, we've been talking a lot about dating and health and those things, but yeah,
hmm
this is a beast to navigate head on.
Well, I think this is the thing. I like it's work is really such a complicated thing in such a different domain because there's one aspect like when you actually start like really doing something you love, you become a workaholic. And
hmm
and then also there's an aspect where it's like where do you find the balance of like enjoying life and working? And then also like as you're growing up, like my first job, I worked for my grandfather in his pharmacy at 7 because let me tell you why I had to work at 7 years old. Child labor, by the way.
You
But
said it, yeah.
but I we had moved to Iran. I went to my grandparents for the summer. My mom and my siblings all went back to like my grandparents lived in the north part of Iran. My family lived in the capital, Tehran, and everyone else went back and I just spent the summer at my grandparents' house. And so at my grandparents' house, like I would go out and play with the kids. And my grandfather, who owned the pharmacy in the town, pretty much told all the stores, like, this is my granddaughter, whatever she needs, whatever she wants, just She'll buy it, leave it on my tab, and as I come home at the end of the night, I'll pay her tab. Like I'll walk into the stores
Yeah.
and I'll pay her tab. So it was like a couple of days before school starts and a couple of days before I had to go back, we're all playing outside, and all of these kids that come from very different socioeconomic statuses are like talking about how they don't get to have like their pen that they want, or they don't have books or whatever to go
Hmm.
to school.
Yeah.
So I take them to the store
This is amazing.
and I pretty much say like, take whatever you want. like, like about 15 kids, mind you. So on the way back home, my grandfather, and like I used to shop at the market and I used to shop at the store
Yeah.
because I used to get coloring pencils and whatever I needed. So he
Yeah.
used to stop at like three main stores, and he came home and he called me, and I like ran downstairs, and my grandfather does not get upset. He did not get upset often. And I run downstairs and I was like expecting ice cream because he brought home ice cream every time. And he
Yeah.
was pissed. So, so he's like, for the rest, until you pay off this bill, moving forward, every summer you're coming back and you're working at the pharmacy, and you are going to sell the pads and the tampons to the women because I don't want to sell that anyways. Like, and you are working. So for 5 years, I had to work at the pharmacy to pay off my debt. I didn't get paid. I had to show up on time. If I didn't show up on time, I got more deducted. I had to like do the inventory. Again, I'm like 8, 9 doing inventory in the back. Like, and
This
then
is,
I got fired from this job because I paid my debt and he no longer needed me.
I feel like you were laid off, to be fair. I feel like that's a layoff. I think my like controversial take here is I'm like, I don't actually think that one was your fault. You were 7. You were like, apparently you just take whatever you want and then someone else takes care of it. Like that seems confusing for a 7-year-old. So
Right?
in your
And
7-year-old defense,
I
that
was
sounds pretty
taking
confusing.
care of the other children too. I was being kind. And I remember he was like, "You can't be kind with my money."
I respect that this was like, yes, I think it was like a learning moment for everybody. Yeah,
Yes.
so there's that. Yeah. And that's how
Yeah.
we both got fired. We both get fired from our first jobs. Yeah,
Yes.
I feel like yours, yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
we had a rocky start to the whole workforce
Yes.
situation.
My second job, I also got laid off. I worked at a coffee shop in Glendale, California, and I had to be there at
Amazing.
5 in the morning. And I was there at 5 in the morning, but people did not like the coffee I made for them. Just,
What happens at 5 in the morning is a different life. Yeah, it's like, yeah,
yeah, man.
there are, yeah, it's just a different experience.
It is a
And I think
different
it's so
experience.
interesting talking about like these moments of like these moments in time where it's like really hard to connect to. And I think that when I was like kind of earlier on in my life and I felt like I was just more working um to be able like working to survive, and it didn't feel like work held any passion or like actual interest in it. I felt like it was so, and obviously there are moments where it's still hard to do things. It's not like
Yeah.
I live in like a fairy tale land where I'm like, being fulfilled means not experiencing other emotions. But I do think that it was so hard just to activate behavior. Like I was working at a gym for a few years, and I mean, when I would have to get there, it would open at 5:30. I'd have to get there at 5. And I was like a straight up gremlin when I got there. And I would frequently get there and realize this is not a typical behavior for me, but I would have two different shoes on. Like I was so tired when I left the house that I would just be wearing like a ballet flat and a sneaker. And I'm just like, to this day, I've never made that mistake outside of this experience. And I didn't have a substance use problem, so that wasn't the problem. But I would just be so tired. I'd be like, I'm just putting on shoes and leaving the house. But it was so much harder to get there. And I think it's not as hard. Obviously, I also don't have to get to work at 5 a.m. So
Yeah.
that might help too. But it was so hard to just get there. And it's so hard, I think, not feeling disconnected from what you're doing, or disconnected doesn't align with your values, maybe, or any of the other kind of things that we hold kind of next to motivation.
Yeah. I think the other thing, like, and like, it's funny because I actually do have like between adolescence and then like
Yeah.
clients that have been like going through other things in life that they're now kind of getting into learning how to be in the work world, or like even
Mm-hmm.
more grown high functioning adults that talk about like getting laid off and not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
One thing that I always say is like, as at for me at least, I can say, as with every job, I learned how to like be a good employee, right? Like with every job, I had to like get written up, although it feels like shit. I had to get written up to learn how to be, and the jobs that I had like started with the coffee shop, and then I worked at Windsor's Fashion, and then I worked at Swatch Watch, and then I worked at Nordstrom's, and then I got a job at an office, which like literally got laid off in two weeks. They didn't even keep me past the 2 week mark because like I was so much better at customer service than I was at doing like computer work. It just wasn't my thing. And with each job, it kind of taught me what I am
Yeah.
good at and which route to go. Which then, when I actually became the mental health tech at Clearview, that's when I like realized like I'm actually a really good at providing therapy. Like it's actually something that I'm
Yeah.
good at. Um, and I'm enjoying it and I'm loving it. But then there are times where, and for me, I ended up leaving my job as a clinical director, but there are a lot of people that they just get laid off and
Mm-hmm.
they don't know. And most people that I've like personally that have been in my office or even in my life that I've talked to, when they've gotten laid off, it's not necessarily a job that if I ask them, like, do you love what you're doing? It's not necessarily a job that they're like, yeah, I really love it. More often, they're kind of like, no, it's just something that I got into that pays my bills and takes care of the things that I need to take care of. So then they start going through this phase of starting to think about what they want to do because the reality is we do, at least in our country, we do live in a world where you work more than half the day.
Yeah.
You really do. It's not like in Europe where they work 4 hours and they live the rest of the day. And they still live and pay their bills and everything. Like for us, like you work at least at least 8 hours, at most 10 hours to 12 hours a day. So you really do have to do something that you love doing and that's a hobby, that's fun, that is exciting, that's like that brings up a lot of positive emotions because if not, it really does affect your mental health and your physical health because you're just doing things just to pay bills. You're not you're not enjoying those 8 hours of life. And that 8 hours can cause a lot of psychological stressors if you're not enjoying it even the slightest bit, because every job is stressful.
Oh yeah. And capitalism, baby, it's a
Oh
whole
my
thing.
God, dude.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Yeah, we're not, and this is one of the things my husband always jokes. He's like, "Oh, like in Europe, like people, work to live, and in America, people live to work." And he's
To
always
work.
saying it as a joke. And I'm like, "Okay, yes, I understand capitalism." And I think that like a lot of what you're hitting on is being able to actually like what do we actually extract from it other than a paycheck of like
Yeah.
actual work, and like being able to have it be connected to something bigger and in different moments in time. That's probably that changes for people, like of like the degree to which like the importance of a specific paycheck based on what people are in their lives, the importance of feeling kind of fulfilled by your work. And it's one of those things when I think about values of like one of my values is that I want to be able to be doing something that I actually feel fulfilled. And that's not a requirement. Like some people are like, I actually really want to just get in X amount of hours so that I can do the things that I want to do. And really my life starts when I leave. And it's just
Hmm.
hard. I feel like when we're like thinking about um, finding like, you know, how do we like figure out what work is for us? And it's hard to really make that determination. I think it's such an individual experience of like in the hierarchy of needs, like it is honestly, it's a privilege to be able to choose what I do and to have work have more meaning for me because like if other needs are being met, I get to be thinking. I get to have the privilege of actually thinking about what I want. How do I want to be spending my time and all of those things? So definitely kind of there is that kind of privilege in this conversation. But when we're thinking about like kind of moments of maybe being laid off and starting to kind of really have a conversation with yourself about, well, what is my next step? And oftentimes, I think what you're speaking to is these moments when it's like kind of unplanned conversations with ourselves
Hmm.
surrounding what we're going to be doing next. And that really oftentimes is a moment to figure out, like, well, what meaning do I want to assign to this time? Was I reflecting back on the work that I was doing, but does that really kind of fit my needs?
Yeah. And I think that, and this is the thing, like, because there is this whole mindset that, like, it's such a I'm in such a dialectic with this mindset. That, like, the mindset of you can do whatever you want, you can make whatever dreams you want come true. Like,
Yeah.
just believe in yourself and make it happen. I'm in such a dialectical place that to truth, like, for me, there's one aspect where I do believe it. I really do, especially at least in this country, I
Yeah.
believe it. Like there are a lot of countries that I'm like, that's not really the way of life. Like people can
Hmm.
believe all they want, but like in a country like India where you are like deemed as lower class and you cannot come out of that, and if you do, like it like you literally have to break barriers and break yourself to come out of that. We can freely come out more easily than other people from like the type of life that we're living. And and it's not necessarily that true either. Like it really is years of struggle, years of like right now, for me, like I did leave my job with the mentality of like I can start my own company and I can do my own thing. And
Yeah.
if I believe in myself, I can do it. And now, 3 years in, I'm like, fuck, man. Like, I feel stuck. Like, I don't know how to be able to make enough money to be able to have that, like, American life that I want in California, buy myself a house. Like, I don't know how, what else. Like, I have to have seven types of income coming in to be able to do that. And yeah, I believe in myself. Yes, I could do it, but like, some of these incomes I don't want to do. Like it's not things that I like to do. It's things that I have to
Yeah.
do to be able to. So it's such a dialectical thing for me because that's the thing that we're constantly talking about with people. Just believe it
Yeah.
and do whatever you want. And I love that mentality because most of my life I did. And I don't want to not teach the younger generation, listen, if you believe in yourself, anything is possible.
Mhm.
And I think people do need to also understand just because you believe in yourself doesn't mean you don't have to do things that you don't want to do to make it. That doesn't mean that it's just going to come to you. It's not going to come to you. And living in in the type of world that we live in, which is all about
Yeah.
money, like you have to work really, really, really hard. And I was telling Adriel, I like had a topic about writing a book. I want to write a book.
Hmm.
Um, and the topic is And Angel's like, you really have all these ideas of writing books, but you never sit down and write them. And I'm like, I don't believe in
Yeah.
myself that much to write books yet. Like, I like the idea of me writing books, but I don't think I have like the confidence in me to write books. But the idea was how in our world, there's a part of us that has enabled, like money has become our survival. And it really does lead people to fight, fight, and freeze. And you have to actually, like, you have to do things to push people to, like, give you your money's worth because everyone wants to half-ass it, especially corporations. And also, like, there's an aspect where you really have to be stingy with your money. You have to be very, like, thing with your money. And I was like, it's really, it's so far away from, like, the thing that we say, be kind and be giving and be fair. Like, it's a lot more, you have to be more selfish, unfortunately, to be able to mm, get that thing that is our survival, which is money.
It's so hard that, like, yeah, I think everything being so intrinsically tied to money, it's like the bedrock of capitalism, I think, creates this, like, it feels impossible at times to be able to kind of like do it all. And like, I think it is a harsh reality that at times we have to do things that are like working jobs that maybe you don't want, or like spending more hours doing something than you would want to. And it's hard just balancing. It's like kind of such a weird concept of like kind of spending so many years like studying school is the most important thing, and then it really is that like kind of work becomes such a central feature of our lives. And it's like just in the way that
Hmm.
education was maybe in earlier years of our life, work really kind of is become centered for some time, and it's hard to navigate that. Like I think where we started was talking about this idea of becoming like a workaholic, and I think that there's such a incentive to be that way. Of
Yeah.
course there's an incentive to, because it feels like, I think for many people feeling like the amount that I make is never enough. And if there's a possibility of doing more, earning more, I think there's so much pressure. And especially like living in, Los Angeles, like I think it's hard to imagine ever being able to get to a level of feeling kind of comfortable. It's like the hedonic treadmill of life here.
And I think that's the thing where there's a part that, like, it really, it's hard when you get laid off at an age where, like, you really are in the midst of, like, dealing with capitalism, which is like, I will say our generation, like, we are in the midst of dealing with the fact that, like, shit, we do live in a capitalistic world. And how are we going to thrive in a world that's stacked against us in a sense? That's making it very difficult. And then on top of that, you lose your job. And now you're dealing with a capitalistic world with this immense anxiety of, like, how am I even going to be able to pay my bills?
Mm-hmm.
And this is like kind of tying it to a little bit of at least like the homeless problem that everyone keeps talking about. Like, another aspect of it is a lot of the people that end up homeless on the streets are actually people that can't afford to live in their homes and stuff like that. And they end up on the streets and they end up having to do drugs to stay awake at nights. And then that kind of pattern keeps just kind of like affecting it. But the reality is, our homeless problem does come from capitalism. Like, it really is a lot more of it. It's like people want to talk about mental health. Like, our governor wants to blame it on all these other reasons. But the reality is capitalism is the main issue. Most people that are homeless cannot afford living anywhere because they can't, either they work at McDonald's and they're getting minimum wage, and our rent is no longer, or they've retired from a job that doesn't offer social security, that doesn't pay them, and no one's going to hire them anymore. Or they've, like, gone through things that they can't have a job, they can't figure out how to make money to be able to pay their bills, so they're stuck on the streets. So anytime anyone ever asks me, like, what do you think is our homeless problem? I'm like, capitalism. That's my theory of why we have a homeless problem in our country, not, and they've shipped them all to California, but in our country, we have a homeless problem. Is capitalism. And when someone loses their job, it takes about a year to find a job. So if that person didn't have the ability to save money, or they saved money and they went through their savings and they still haven't been able to find a job, you can't say that they're homeless because they're choosing to and they're not trying. Do you know how hard it is to find a job? It's not that easy. Even if it's McDonald's or Target, like it's not that easy to find a job and to keep it and have a shitty paycheck and to figure out how to survive. So it really I talk to my clients a lot. I'm like, listen, you it's that anxiety of how am I going to pay my bills? It's real.
Yeah.
And then this whole mindset that believe in yourself and you can figure it out, that's real too. But there's a part of that that doesn't really fit into reality sometimes. You got to figure out how to pay your bills before you can dream.
It's so a lot of what you're speaking to is, I think, the reality of like kind of how all of these factors like fit together of like the lack of affordable housing, the lack, not having enough of a social safety net for folks for when things happen. And there are so many like different pieces, I think, especially when we're like trying to like kind of navigate the world that we live in and all of the ineffective qualities to it. A lot of this is reminding me actually of our conversation of the healthcare system of like our infrastructure is flawed. Our
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure is such that people are not able to afford housing. People are kind of unable to kind of get out from underneath circumstances of like get out of from debt. Like there are all of these different things that happen that prevent people from being able to kind of get to the next level, to be able to dream, to be able to meet their basic needs. And the infrastructure problem is really hard to it's hard to address it. It's like how do we kind of address something when if our infrastructure is flawed, how do we get out from underneath this? And there isn't really a good answer. Like I don't anticipate that we're going to be able to solve kind of the issues of the kind of issues of universal basic income or poverty or any of those things on our 20-minute podcast. However, it is important, I think, just to note of like these things are these kind of real and valid issues that people are struggling with and the valid fear that people have in these moments of how am I going to get through this next period of my life?
And this is the thing. This is, and again, for me, it's just a theory because we have been talking about all of these infrastructures that are so like from the healthcare to even like capitalism and financial, and I've been like seeing it happen. And this is why I was like, I wanna write a book and give my theory of what the solution is. And what the solution in my mind is like there is so much we're enabling, right? And we're enabling, like I was telling Adriel, imagine like my parents are going through their shit, right? And it's like they like you have to be on the phone with the insurance company for 4 or 5 hours pushing
Yeah.
them to actually like provide the care that they are supposed to when you pay $800 a month per person
Yeah.
for your fucking insurance. You're paying $800 a month, and then suddenly when the time comes, like, oh no, we're only going to cover enough that keeps you 60% healthy, where it's not our job to keep you 100%
Yeah.
healthy. The rest of it, you have to pay your own money. It's like, well, why the fuck have I been paying you? And in my mind, I was like, imagine like that parent that has a sick kid that is working and like working the bare like minimum paycheck and is like like has to take care of their other kids and has to take care of the job and they don't have and they have to take care of their sick kid and they don't have money to put the other they don't have money, they don't also have that 6 hours a day to be on the phone with insurance company pushing and fighting for insurance company to pay for the fucking thing that they're supposed to pay for. So in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
insurance companies are getting away with enabling, right? We're enabling it because we
Yeah.
don't have the time, or like in our minds it's like nothing's going to happen. And this last like
Mm-hmm.
couple of weeks ago, so my I have a Mercedes, and the back differentiator, which is something in the middle of the back tires, it's cracked, which is something that should not be cracked in a car that drives in the city,
Yeah, that
right?
feels right.
And
I don't even know
so
what it is, but I don't think it should be correct.
and it costs $8,000 to fix it.
I'm sorry,
And
did you
I
say 8,000?
$8,000. And so they were like, you're about 3 months over warranty, so we're not going to cover it. I was like, oh, the hell you are not. Like, I do not care. I will be, and you don't understand how many hours. And I, again, am lucky enough that I can use my brother's 2009 Honda CRV to drive around. But like, I had to, my car's been sitting there for 4 months now. I've been on the phone with Mercedes. Like, I don't care that you're telling this is not a me problem. This is a Mercedes problem. And if you're telling me there are no callbacks on this car, again, I don't care. You are going to pay for this car. You are going to fix my car because I drive in the city. I am not paying for something that I like. This should not be happening to my car. And so I push, and I finally like I was able to get them to cover for 50% with $1,000 whatever. But like even that, I'm like, I'm just so tired of fighting you. Fuck it, I'll pay the 50%. Which in my mind, I was like, Adriel, I'm fucking enabling capitalism. I'm enabling it. Like I'm allowing them to take my money when they should be giving. Like if I pay for a Mercedes, you better be giving me a quality car. You're giving me a shitty car. Like, rather go back to driving the Toyota, bro.
I mean,
So
I honestly know nothing about cars, but I do know that that sounds completely insane. That it's like the warranty was up. Yeah, there are all of these things, and like I think this is one of those things. It's like not these like kind of surprise, like kind of not necessarily catastrophic, but these surprise like kind of expenses that can just
yeah,
completely overhaul any expectations you had about what your budget was going to look like this month. And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
like just starting to like realize just how hard it is to get out from underneath some of these circumstances. And it's definitely one of those like things of just having these like kind of surprise stressors. And sometimes it feels like I'm never going to be able to like really make ends meet, or I'm never going to be able to really kind of save for the thing that I want to save for because these unanticipated things come up. And then these circumstances are just totally unfair of like it's so hard, but it's also like hard to imagine like if you didn't have the bandwidth to make those calls, like you would have had a different outcome.
yeah,
And that's like I think such a stressor is like when people are kind of looking at it and they're like, in order to be able to potentially fight this, to potentially get an outcome that isn't satisfactory, but maybe is better than this one, the amount of effort I'm going to have to expend, it's just these, I think the reality of it is just that these things are so hard and it's really painful to like actually approach the reality that we may not be able to have things be the way we want them to, or this is the reality we live in. We have to like work within these systems that are kind of set out to rip you off or like to make you fail.
yeah. And I think that's the thing where when like to kind of bring it for circle, especially because we're sort of out of
Yeah,
time. Like we start in our life, like a job is supposed to help you learn so much, right? It helps you learn discipline. It helps you learn how to like take responsibility. It helps you learn how to do these things. And then at some point, that learning is no longer learning. Now you're just working to live and to survive. And then you
yeah,
start realizing no matter how hard you're working to survive, um, it's really hard because the system is setting you up to fail. And the only way to succeed in a system like this is to be someone that has no morals and no values and is willing to screw other humans and literally, in a sense, financially kill them or like take advantage of them. And that's the thing where you end up like, okay, well, I have to believe and dream.
yeah.
And it's like, but you end up so jaded as a person, and you end up being part of the problem in society, no matter how hard you're trying not to be a part of the problem. So, bringing it all back around, if you end up being a
Yeah.
person that loses your job, you either have to end up settling and just to be able to survive, or you end up having to like fight in ways that like are just, it's not fair, but you have to do it to create something outside of what the system wants you to be.
Hmm. And life is easier if you don't have morals.
Yes, life is much easier if you don't have morals, which I think we should actually go into that topic our next
Yes.
episode. I kind of like
Yes.
shifting into that. With that being said, we're going to end today's off the clock
Yeah.
conversations with Lily and Lauren. Thank you
Hmm.
guys for joining us. Although this is going to be the week after my birthday, happy birthday to myself. And as Snoop Dogg
Hmm.
likes to say, I want to thank myself for everything that I've done for myself because I've
Beautiful.
happy
Yes.
birthday to me.
Happy birthday to Lily.
Bye.
Bye now.